What happens when one of music's most legendary icons comes face-to-face with late-night television's most controversial host? You won't believe what unfolded when Cher sat down with Jimmy Kimmel for what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview, only to witness one of the most explosive confrontations in talk show history. The tension that erupted last night has sent shockwaves through Hollywood and left viewers stunned by what they saw unfold live on television. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what happens when two entertainment powerhouses clash in the most unexpected way possible. The stage was set for what appeared to be another typical Tuesday night episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live. Cher, the iconic singer and actress, had been booked to promote her latest documentary and upcoming tour dates. The 77-year-old superstar arrived at the Hollywood Boulevard studio looking radiant in a flowing black ensemble, her signature long hair cascading over her shoulders. She had done hundreds of these interviews over her 6-decade career, and this one was expected to be just another friendly chat about her latest projects. But from the moment Cher stepped onto that familiar set, something felt different. The usual warmth that defines most celebrity interviews was noticeably absent. Kimmel, known for his quick wit and occasionally sharp tongue, seemed unusually tense as he welcomed the Grammy-winning legend to his show. The audience erupted in their typical enthusiastic applause, completely unaware that they were about to witness television history in the making. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only Cher," Kimmel announced with his trademark grin. But those paying close attention could detect something forced about his enthusiasm. Cher gracefully made her way to the guest chair, waving to the crowd with the poise that only comes from decades of performing before millions. The first few minutes proceeded normally enough. Kimmel asked about Cher's documentary, which chronicles her rise from a backup singer to one of the world's most recognizable entertainers. Cher responded with her characteristic candor and humor, sharing anecdotes about her early days in the music industry and her evolution as an artist. The audience was captivated, hanging on every word as she described the challenges of being a woman in the male-dominated entertainment world of the 1960s. However, seasoned viewers of late-night television could sense an undercurrent of tension brewing beneath the surface. Kimmel's questions, while seemingly harmless, carried a subtle edge that hadn't been present in his previous celebrity interviews. His follow-ups seemed designed to push boundaries rather than simply encourage conversation. "You know, Cher, you've been very vocal about politics lately," Kimmel said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk that would soon prove ill-advised. "Some people might say celebrities should stick to entertaining and leave the serious stuff to the politicians." The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Cher's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but those familiar with her fiery personality recognized the warning signs. Her posture straightened, her eyes narrowed slightly as she processed what had just been said on live television. "Well, Jimmy," Cher replied, her voice still melodic but edged with steel, "I've been around long enough to know that staying silent when you see injustice isn't really an option for me anymore." The audience erupted in applause, but Kimmel seemed determined to press further. What happened next would set the stage for one of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night television history. The narration might say because Kimmel didn't back down. But don't you think there's a responsibility that comes with having such a large platform? He continued, his tone sharpening. "When you tweet something to your millions of followers, shouldn't you be more careful about the message you're sending?" The question struck a nerve that Kimmel clearly hadn't anticipated. Cher's decades of experience dealing with dismissive attitudes toward her intelligence and political awareness came flooding back. This wasn't just another interview question, was a challenge to her right to have opinions, delivered with the same condescending tone she'd been fighting against her entire career. The tension in the studio became palpable as Cher took a moment to gather her thoughts. And what came next would change everything. Careful. Cher repeated, her voice rising slightly as she leaned forward in her chair. Jimmy, I've been careful my entire life, Cher began, her voice steady but charged with emotion. I was careful when people told me I couldn't sing. Careful when they said I couldn't act. Careful when I was told to keep my mouth shut about things that actually matter. But you know what? Being careful got me nowhere except pushed around by men who thought they knew better. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was not the light-hearted banter they expected from a celebrity interview. Kimmel, realizing he'd struck a deeper nerve than intended, tried to recover with his usual humor, but the damage was done. Hey, I'm just saying with great power comes great responsibility. Kimmel quipped with a forced chuckle, tossing in a Spider-Man reference that fell flat in the increasingly tense atmosphere. Maybe we could all use a little more Spider-Man wisdom in our Twitter feeds. The joke landed with a thud. Cher's expression hardened, and for a moment, she looked every bit the indomitable icon who had commanded stages around the world. The woman who had conquered every corner of entertainment was not about to be dismissed or patronized on live television. Are you seriously comparing my political engagement to a comic book character? Cher shot back, her voice now carrying the full weight of decades in the spotlight. Jimmy, I've used my platform to raise awareness about issues that affect real people's lives. I've supported veterans' LGBTQ+ rights and social justice causes for longer than some of your viewers have been alive. The studio fell into a low murmur. The audience could sense something rare unfolding before their eyes. This wasn't scripted banter or a harmless detour from the usual format. This was a genuine clash of values between two figures with very different ideas about celebrity responsibility. Kimmel, visibly flustered, made the mistake of pressing on instead of changing the subject. His next words marked the point of no return. Look, Cher, I respect your passion. I really do, he said, his tone taking on a subtle but unmistakable condescension. But sometimes I wonder if celebrities like yourself really understand the complexity of the issues you're tweeting about. I mean, do you really think a pop star's opinion on foreign policy carries the same weight as someone who's actually studied these things? The insult hit its mark with surgical precision. Cher's face flushed with controlled fury. The phrase pop star reducing her multifaceted decades-long career to a single dismissive label was the final straw. A pop star. She repeated, her voice now icy and deliberate. Jimmy, I've been fighting for causes you probably couldn't even pronounce when I started my career. I've testified before Congress. I've worked with humanitarian organizations around the world. And I've put my money where my mouth is for decades. The audience fell completely silent. Even the normally lively crowd understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. Something that could define both careers in that moment. Kimmel, sensing the interview slipping out of his control, tried one last time to defuse the situation. His next words, however, only made things worse. Hey, I'm not trying to attack you here, he said, raising his hands in mock surrender but keeping that smug expression. I'm just saying, maybe, just maybe it's worth listening to experts, instead of getting our news from celebrity Twitter accounts. That's all. The condescending tone and dismissive gesture were the final provocation. Cher's composure snapped. She rose abruptly from her chair, the suddenness of her movement stunning the entire studio. The legendary performer, all 5 feet 8 inches of her, loomed over the seated host with a commanding, unmistakable presence. Her voice, when she finally spoke, carried the full force of a woman who had spent decades refusing to be silenced. Listen to experts. Cher's tone sliced through the studio like a blade. Jimmy, I am an expert in what it's like to be marginalized. To fight for your place in this world, and to use whatever platform you have to make things better. You sit behind this desk every night making jokes about politicians and celebrities. But when have you ever put yourself on the line for anything that actually matters? The audience was struck silent. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was raw, unfiltered emotion from one of the most iconic voices in show business. Kimmel's face paled as he realized his guest was no longer playing by the usual talk show rules. "Cher, please, he started. But she cut him off with a sharp wave of her hand that brooked no interruption. "No, you don't get to share. Please me after what you just said," she shot back, her voice rising to fill every corner of the studio. "You want to talk about celebrity Twitter accounts? Let me tell you something about mine, Jimmy. When I tweet about veterans' issues, it's because I've spent years working with wounded warriors. When I tweet about civil rights, it's because I lived through the fight for equality. When I tweet about humanitarian crises, it's because I've been to those places and seen the suffering with my own eyes, behind the cameras." The production crew frozen sure whether to keep rolling or cut to commercial. Everyone in that studio knew they were witnessing something that would be replayed, dissected, and debated for years to come. Kimmel, now visibly sweating under the harsh studio lights, made another fatal error. Instead of de-escalating with humility, he tried to smooth things over with forced humor. "Look, I think we're getting a little heated here," he said with a nervous laugh, gesturing toward her as if she were overreacting. "Maybe we should take a deep breath and remember, we're all friends here. This is supposed to be fun, right?" The patronizing tone and dismissive gesture were the final straw. Cher's eyes flashed with a fury honed by decades of condescension and dismissal. What she said next would make headlines around the world within hours. "Friends," she said, her voice dropping to a low, deadly whisper that carried more weight than her earlier anger. "Jimmy, friends don't ambush each other on live television. Friends don't dismiss each other's life's work as celebrity nonsense, and friends, sure as hell, don't tell each other to take a deep breath when they're calling out disrespect." The studio was so silent that even the hum of the cameras was audible. The audience held its collective breath, sensing this was a moment that would define both careers. Kimmel, finally realizing how far things had spiraled, tried one last time to regain control. "Okay, you know what? Maybe we should just agree to disagree," he said, irritation creeping into his voice. "This is getting a little too intense for a comedy show, don't you think? Maybe we should talk about something lighter like your new tour dates or something." The attempt to trivialize the confrontation only deepened the wound. Too intense for a comedy show. Cher repeated, her tone calm now, but dangerously calm, the kind that made everyone in the room sit a little straighter. "Jimmy, the only thing too intense here is your inability to treat a guest with basic respect. You invited me on your show. You questioned my credibility. You dismissed my intelligence. And now you want to pretend it never happened?" Then came the moment that everyone in that studio would remember for the rest of their lives. Cher stepped forward toward Kimmel's desk, her presence commanding every inch of the space. When she spoke again, her voice carried 6 decades of experience, the authority of someone who had fought and won every battle twice. "You know what, Jimmy?" she said evenly. "I've sat through thousands of interviews in my career. I've dealt with hosts who are unprepared, hosts who were rude, and hosts who clearly didn't want me there. But I have never never been invited onto a show only to have everything. I stand for systematically torn down under the guise of humor and polite smiles." The camera crew kept filming, instinctively aware they were capturing television history as the moments spiraled far. Beyond anyone's expectations, Kimmel shifted uneasily in his chair, his trademark confidence evaporating under the weight of Cher's righteous fury. "I think you're overreacting," he began, but Cher's voice cut through his words like thunder. "Overreacting?" Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "Jimmy, I'm underreacting. Do you have any idea what it's like to spend your entire career being told by men that your opinions don't matter? That you should just sing and smile? I thought we were past that, but clearly, some people never learn. She turned to the audience, her voice resonating across the studio and out through the cameras to millions of viewers witnessing a defining moment in late-night television. "Ladies and gentlemen," she declared, clear and unwavering, "this is what disrespect looks like in 2025. It doesn't always shout it often, hides behind fake concern, dressed up as questions about responsibility, or suggestions that you don't understand the very issues you've been fighting for longer than some people have been alive." The room was silent. The audience transfixed. Many reached for their phones, already aware they were witnessing something that would dominate social media within minutes. Kimmel, red-faced and visibly rattled, tried one last time to recover. "Cher, I never meant to save it," she interrupted, her tone final, unyielding. "You meant every word, Jimmy. The question is whether you're man enough to own it." She walked back to her seat, picking up her purse with deliberate grace. Every movement was intentional, quiet statement that she was leaving by choice, not defeat. "You know what the saddest part of this is?" she said, turning once more to face him. "I came here tonight genuinely excited to talk about my work, my documentary, my tour. I wanted to share stories that might inspire people to celebrate a journey that's taken a lifetime. Instead, I was ambushed by someone who clearly has no respect for his guests or their experiences." Her voice softened, carrying a weight heavier than anger disappointment. "Jimmy, you have a platform that reaches millions every night. You could use it to lift people up, to celebrate their achievements, to start meaningful conversations about real issues. Instead, you used it to tear down a guest who came here in good faith. That says everything about your character." Kimmel sat frozen behind his desk, knowing anything he said would only make things worse. The man known for his quick wit and effortless comebacks had been rendered speechless by the sheer power of Cher's authenticity. "I've been in this business for over 60 years, she continued, her voice now calm but edged with sorrow. "I've seen it change, grow, become more inclusive and respectful. But clearly, some corners of it are still stuck in the past, still convinced they can belittle women who dare to have opinions." At the edge of the stage, she paused and turned for one final statement, one that would be quoted and replayed endlessly. "To everyone watching at home, remember this moment. Remember that respect isn't something you earn by staying quiet or playing nice. Respect is something you demand when you're treated unfairly, something you give freely when it's deserved." Jimmy clearly doesn't understand either. With that, Cher walked off the set with the same poise and dignity that had defined her career. The sound of her heels clicking across the studio floor, the only noise in a space that usually buzzed with laughter. Kimmel sat alone, facing a silent audience and rolling cameras that captured his stunned expression for the world to see. The host, once celebrated for his composure, had been completely undone by a guest who refused to tolerate disrespect. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation flooded every social media platform. #RespectShare began trending worldwide as viewers voiced admiration for her courage, not just for herself, but for every woman who'd ever been dismissed or patronized. By morning, Kimmel's ratings had plummeted, and entertainment insiders were questioning whether he had permanently damaged his reputation. The confrontation became more than a viral moment. It became a cultural milestone, a stark reminder that dignity and respect are not negotiable, no matter the stage.